They say that you make money when you buy a property, but you will lose it just as quickly if you do not manage your property well. And one of the biggest expenses and most difficult things to track for a landlord is the usage of their water and electricity. Yes, we all know that doing prepaid meters is a great idea, especially because we have an increase in the tariffs for electricity as Eskom just tries to claw back as much of the money it's lost over the last few years and around the mismanagement. And we also know that water can be incredibly challenging, especially as we saw in Cape Town with the water crisis over the last few years, that literally those water tariffs can change so quickly that if you're not on top of your game, you could actually also be losing a lot of money. So with suddenly a lot of people turning to prepaid water and prepaid electricity meters, it did seem like a good idea, but there are still a whole lot of challenges because some of our tenants still try and be crafty and look to see if they can bridge the meter and thereby take electricity before it actually gets to the meter, thereby getting and stealing free electricity. So are there different ways that we can help manage that? I've spent quite a bit of time over the last 2 months looking to see how to tweak it, how to close those loopholes. I'm going to share some of those strategies with you today, as well as a whole range of other things, and I'll see you on the other side. So this is an example of a multi-let with got 15 different leases on this property, and what I wanted to show you is how we've set up some of the electricity, and of course they each have prepaid water and prepaid electricity. So this is one of our units. It's actually a prefabricated garage, concrete garage, that we have just very quickly just painted. It's very old. We just put in the toilet at the moment, possible shower later on, and each one has its own electricity and its own water. And from our side, it's always a challenge to ensure that the tenants do not bridge the electrical meters, and I'll show you why. Because we've got the electricity coming from the main board, and it comes through these trunking channels. And the challenge is that someone can easily just open it up and perhaps even short the wire and use it themselves. So what I've done is with these different units up here, when the line comes in, I've put a little meter, and I'm going to show you what that looks like now. Here is our DB board, and what I've got is I've got the main supply coming in from the municipality. And then what it does is it goes to each of the different 1, 2, 3, and 4 units. And what I've done is I've put this little electrical meter in. As you can see, it actually is checking the numbers. And what that allows me to do is I can take a reading of this every month, and I can see how much electricity all of these have used. And then when I get the readouts from those different sub meters from council, I can see, or from Satik, because they're all prepaid, I can see if however much they've added up must add to that. If not, it means that they have possibly breached or bridged the power going from the mains coming in before it gets to their meter. So for example, if one of them get the line before it actually gets to the sub-meter, then that is an actual risk. And here we can see some of the other units. There's 3 there, and it moves along. So for example, I've got the supply coming down here, but if someone opens this up, they could actually plug something in and take it before it gets to the board and the meter. So I want to make sure that the sum of all of the meters is therefore going to be equal to the amount of electricity used. So that really allows me just to keep monitoring and showing that they're not bridging, they're not shorting it out so that they're using free electricity. And it's just another way in which we can manage this and measure so that it really works well. So there was a video of me on site in one of our refurbishments and our pivoting that we needed to do coming out of the COVID lockdown, where we needed to very quickly just pivot and actually shift usage of some of our buildings. And on that property, we had 15 leases. I wanted to put in place some kind of system that I could measure and just make sure that my tenants weren't going to abuse the actual wiring that we had put in place. And as you could see, it would be incredibly easy because all they'd have to do is just open up the trunking and they could just clip a connector on and therefore actually have free electricity, even though their meters, they would still be buying electricity through their prepaid meter. But the problem is that they would take that before it got to the meter. You could see in that video that I shared with you that I had taken one unit counter and I'd put it on the distribution board. Therefore, that would tell me the total amount of electricity used by all the different units, and I would be able to cross-correlate that to make sure then if what was being paid and used equal to the amount that the meter was telling me. Now, you could actually go a step further, and on each of the units, so where it was 1, I could put a counter there. For unit 2, I could put a separate counter there. Unit 3, I could put a separate counter there, which would therefore actually enable me to really hone in and ensure that each unit was actually being used effectively, because I could know exactly what was leaving the distribution board and what they were buying. And in theory, those two should match up over time. And if what is being used going away from the main board is a lot more than what is actually being paid for and used via the prepaid meter, I would know that someone is taking that electricity before it gets there, and it would enable me to act on it, as opposed to months later saying something looks wrong here because these tenants are paying so little and yet the electricity bill is so high, because I'm still having to pay the municipality for the amount of electricity used. So that could be one scenario that you could take this to another level. The challenges there would be space on your distribution board, so that wherever the breaker was that goes to a certain unit, you could have your own meter counter there, so that you could check that. But that would mean that you would have to have space in your distribution board. But for most of us who are looking at between 2 to maybe 4, 5 units on a property as multi-lets, this is definitely the way that I'll go around that. The second thing is, of course, we also wanting to make sure that what we're paying to the municipality equals the amount of money that we are getting refunded back by the prepaid meter company. Some people, in my experience, some investors out there just feel that because they've put a prepaid meter in, everything is hunky-dory and nothing can go wrong. It is far from that case. We also need to ensure that the prepaid meter company are charging the right tariff for your property, and of course when tariffs change, they are changing that at the same time. Otherwise, your prepaid meter company could be charging a lower rate than the municipality is actually charging you, and therefore you are going to lose money because you're going to be paying for electricity, and the amount of money you're getting back from the prepaid companies as they recover it to you is not going to be on track. So I just set up a quick spreadsheet, which is how I run all my properties, to look again to see is what is being bought as the money and the number of units equal to what I'm having to pay, because ultimately that's what our jobs are, is to facilitate that process. I'm not here to make money on the electricity purchase. I just want to make sure that it is fair and square, although bear in mind that you as the landlord can actually instruct the electrical company of the prepaid meter to charge whatever you're asking for in the prepaid meter scenario. And while we're actually talking about that, bear in mind that in many municipalities, you now have service charges. In other words, either it is a day rate, so you have availability charges. In other words, it's a general usage charge, often calculated per day, and then you have the amount of electricity that you've used. Just bear in mind that many of these prepaid electrical companies do not take into account that daily service charge, which the municipalities or Eskom are actually charging you. So just to bear that in mind. But at the end of the day, you can actually instruct the prepaid electrical company to charge whatever tariff you are wanting. So yes, you could actually make money out of this process, but the challenge is because our tariffs are so high already, you will get flack and a lot of challenge and talk back from your tenants, because they're going to come to you and say, at our last place, we bought 50 Rand and it got us this many units. Or they're going to say their friends are buying and they're getting this units. And then you're going to have to deal with a whole lot of mistrust and challenges from that scenario. So here is another way of how I look at it. This is a different property that I'm going to share with you. Your prepaid meter company should have something similar to this, which says at every month or at any period of time in the date, you can go and say, please tell me how many units, electrical units, each of my my property units bought, how many units they got, and what was the amount that was refunded back to you, which we call the recovery. Here you can see I've got three units on one property, and I'm calling them Unit A, Unit B, Unit C. And as you can see, I've said, please show me the statement for August. So this was just last month. And it tells me that Unit A bought 410 Rand, and that gave them 212 units of electricity. Unit B bought 600, and there was 281 units. And Unit C bought 500, which was 249 units. Obviously, out of that money, there is the VAT. There is also the channel fees. So the channel fee is the fee that the intermediary person pays, whether this be the garage, the shop, checkers. They take a portion as well, so it becomes even more expensive. And of course, then what you're left with is the base rate. And as you can see, what they're saying is this total recovery is the amount of money that this prepaid company is going to deposit, in other words, refund back to me. So even though the Unit A bought 410 Rands of electricity in their books, I'm actually only getting back 352 Rand for those 212 units of electricity. Now, what I want to do is I have to make sure that the money that I'm getting refunded equals what I have to now pay the municipality on the main meter on the property, right? Because I have 1 meter for the property that then is split into 3 sub-meters. And I've got to make sure that the money that I'm getting back from those 3 meters is going to pay for actually the amount of electricity used. And this is the second mistake a lot of property investors make, is they don't cross-correlate and check. And in that way, they might not be able to see if their tenants have actually bridged the meters before it gets there, or of course, if they have set the correct tariff. So here is an example of what I do with that. I created a spreadsheet, which I use for my properties. And as you can see here I've got Units A, Units B, Unit C. And this is how I make it work. That on the left here, I have the dates. Here I put the actual meter reading that the municipality gives me in Eskom. You'll see at the bottom it says start and finish, and then they calculate that amount. Obviously the amount used, but this for me is where it gets more interesting. On this piece of paper, as you can see here, I get this every month, and I very quickly just enter this data in. 410 gives me 212, and I want the recovery 352. And if we take a look at here it is. There's 410, which was Unit A. They bought 212 units, and I'm doing the same with Unit B, Unit C, and therefore this gives me the total. Gives me the total that there was 1,510, right, which is what this is actually saying here. Here we've got 1,510 total purchased rands. Then what it does is I'm saying, okay, how much am I going to get back now? Now, what are they going to pay into my bank account? And you need to cross-correlate that they actually are paying it back, because I've actually had a case where they didn't. They paid it into the wrong account. So this is telling me that the tenants bought 1,510, but the company refunded back to me 1,337. So that now means I need to make sure that that's the kind of amount that I'm going to be paying to the municipality. On this side here, it says that these are all the total number of units that were bought, 742. So adding up these different units that were bought by the tenants would mean 742 units. So now when I'm going to pay the municipality for a certain number of units, I want to know that the two are more or less the same, because that would mean that the amount of electricity used is equal to the amount of electricity bought from the tenants. If those figures are very different, then I have a problem. So this is one way for me to check it. And as you can see here, I just put down on the bottom I want to know the total difference between the two, right? I want to know the difference if it's a large amount, because we have to bear in mind that one of the biggest challenges with this is the prepaid meters are working on the first of the month and end of the month, right? They're saying that in a calendar month, from the 1st to the 30th or the 31st, this is how much was bought, and this is how many units were actually paid for. But that doesn't mean that that is actually the amount of units that were used, because remember, I can buy 2,000 rands worth of electricity and I can use it over 4 months. So the challenge for us is it's not just a simple, easy calculation of in and out. It's going to be over a longer period of time to make sure that it actually starts tallying up, which is why we need a running total like this. And in that scenario, We also find that the municipality sometimes does their readings on the 12th of the month. So that won't help to cross-correlate because they just then can't get it accurate enough. So I'm not looking for the 100% accuracy. I want to know that within a margin of error that there's a consistent kind of figure where they might be out by. As soon as this gets above R1,000, something is wrong. It means I have to go in and check where is it wrong. And that, as I say, could be two scenarios. It could be that the tenants have bridged the meter and therefore are taking electricity but not paying for it. Or it could mean that my tariff is wrong. In other words, the recovery coming back to me is not set correctly, and therefore what the municipality is charging me and what the prepaid company is charging my tenants is not the same, and therefore there's going to be discrepancy there. So this, for me, in this kind of total scenario what we're talking about here, very quickly enables me to see, have I got a problem, or how can I resolve this better? Now, it would be great if this could be done like fully automatically, and in theory it should be. That's why we're having prepaid meters. In my experience, there's still a fundamental human error, which is, like I mentioned, I do not want to get to 6 months down the line and now I've got a big gap of thousands of rands because my tenants have bridged the meter and are just taking electricity and putting their geysers and their heaters and not paying for it. So for example, some might short it, and just on their geysers or on the kettles or stoves, they're using the free electricity. And of course, just so they don't trigger any alarm, in my mind, they still obviously buy some electricity every month, which gets used, but it's not all fair and square. So I always like to be on top of things so I can sort them out straight away. And more importantly, so my tenants know that I'm actually on top of my game, on the ball. Because as soon as I see an issue here, I'm going to knock on their doors and say, can I please come and inspect to make sure that everything is legit? And that is where I'm going to end up keeping much more of my money than the average investor out there. And of course, like I said, this is quite easy to be scalable because I can easily just very quickly punch these numbers in, and it actually is very, very, very quickly do I notice if there's a problem. It's not time consuming. And like I mentioned, just on that one property, I have 15 leases. So I do the same with the water and the electricity, same process, same spreadsheet. And of course, as soon as I pay the municipality, I just put it into here, as you can see in the right-hand column. The yellow is actually implying that it's an estimate reading. So I don't want to go and say, oh, there's a big difference, like 900 Rand here and 2,000 Rand that was paid, because they were taking estimate readings. And this was obviously during COVID. So no one was going out. It was all estimate readings, which is, I'm assuming that now maybe in this month or the next month it will correlate. And then I will see those two totals coming much closer. So at the end of the day, all I want to know is that the amount of electricity and the amount of money spent by my tenants, I'm getting a significant portion of that back, and that must cover all the electricity that I now have to pay to the municipality. And as long as I can measure that, I can do something about it. There's a fantastic phrase that says, what you can't measure, you can't change. You can never go to your tenant and say, I see a problem, I want to sort this out, if you are not measuring or you do not know with certainty what's going on. So here is just an example of one of the other ways in which you can really be on top of your game, become a professional property investor, and ensure that you get to keep that hard-earned money that you've worked for.